Rennie, since you had an oversupply, how did you manage storing the breast milk?
Okay, so I think firstly, like because of my regular pump schedule, I worked myself into an oversupply because I was pumping 7 to 8 times a day, 30 minutes at a time. It was also because of the fact that my baby actually didn't eat that much. Like she was definitely on the lower end of how much babies tend to eat. She still is. Like she doesn't eat like a lot. So I think that's where I was like, oh my God, I have so much milk. Like there was this one time in which half of the top shelf of my fridge was lined with breast milk bottles. So I'm like, okay, I need to figure out a way to kind of do this better. So then I started reading about the fact, can the left and right breast be mixed? The answer is yes. Can you mix milk from different pumping sessions? The answer is yes. Can you mix the milk from day and night? And there's some new research that shows that the night milk has more melatonin and the day milk has more cortisol. But while it may be true, the amount of melatonin and cortisol in that milk doesn't make that much of a difference. So yes, you can mix your day and night milk as well. Right? If you want to be really strict about it, sure, keep night milk and feed it at night, and day milk and keep it in the day. But I just stopped caring about all of that. And then eventually I switched to a pitcher method, like where literally I had a pitcher, like a glass pitcher, and I just started pooling all the milk together. And then we started preparing bottles with that for the day. And then whatever extra milk I had, we used to put it in these freezer bags. And I clearly remember I started with the freezer bags from Pigeon, but they were leaking. So then I switched to the freezer bags from Lancino, and those turned out to be much better. And then I used to freeze 4 ounces at a time because that's how little milk my baby used to eat per feed. So actually, it is better to kind of freeze 4 ounces at a time because then when you defrost it, you can't keep it for that long. And we don't want to waste the breast milk. So that's what we did. Like the day-to-day feeds, the milk went into the pitcher, and then the excess breast milk at the end of the day or at the end of 2 days, depending on when I was free to do the freezing, I used to label the bags, put 4 ounces at a time, put them flat in my freezer, like on top of the ice cube box, put it flat, let it freeze, and then I started adding it to like this basket I had created in the freezer. But I think for a mom who may not know like how long can you keep the milk for, because that is something that moms are normally concerned about, right? Like how long can I keep this milk for that I have just pumped? So there are some guidelines from the CDC that I would love to share with anybody who's listening to this episode. The first one is, if you have just pumped the breast milk, please know that it has antimicrobial properties in it. So you actually can keep it at the countertop, like basically outside, for up to 4 hours. But just a word of caution, this 4 hour room temperature guideline applies if your room is 25 degrees. If it's winter, sure, you can keep it for 4 or 5 hours on the counter. Nothing will happen to the milk. But if it's hot, then just put it in the fridge. So that's with fresh breast milk. Now, in the fridge, it can stay up to 4 days. So you can actually store breast milk in a pitcher, in a bottle, in a bag, in a cup, however ever you want to store it. Keep a sterilized like bottle or a cup. Store breast milk in that up to 4 days at the back of the refrigerator, like not in the door. I used to store it in the door until I read that the temperature change at the door is just too much every time you open and close the fridge. So you want to store it all the way to the back of the fridge. And then when it comes to the freezer, then you can store breast milk up to 6 months in the freezer and up to 12 months if you have a deep freezer. Like, I don't know how cold deep freezer is, probably less than -4 degrees, because our freezers are usually at -4, like 0 to -4 degrees. So that is the guideline that I followed. Sanch, I'll tell you, there was a catch in this, okay? Because I had, at one point, I had a good like 4 to 5 liters of breast milk in the freezer. Like, again, my entire top shelf, my freezer was just taken up with breast milk bags. And that was the time I sort of decided that I think I'm going to start dropping pumping sessions because I didn't need that much milk anymore. I already had a bit of a stash created. So then I started dropping it from 7 sessions to 6 to 5 to 4. When I came down to 4 sessions, I finally started using like one bag a day, which is just one feed a day from my freezer stash. And that's when I got a reality check. Did you know that breast milk can change taste if it's frozen?
So did you felt she noticed that?
My baby actually had a tough time drinking my freezer stash, which I had worked so hard to build. I read about this much later, is that there is this enzyme called lipase. So a lipase is basically an enzyme that breaks down fat. Some mothers, the milk they produce has a very high lipase activity. That enzyme is a little too active. And the way it breaks down the fat, it actually gives the milk a bit of a metallic, soapy taste. And I did taste it, and I was like, oh my god, the breast milk used to taste so sweet when it was fresh, and now it tastes a bit soapy. And my baby was sensitive to it. In the end, we still gave her the frozen breast milk by mixing it with fresh. So we kind of used to prepare like a feed of a bit of fresh, a bit of frozen, and we used that frozen breast milk. But then later on, I discovered that there is a way of reducing that. So again, this is to moms who are watching this episode. Firstly, you want to test out freezing one bag of your breast milk and then defrosting it and then checking what is it like. Does the taste change or does it stay the same or similar? If it stays the same, you're good to go. If the breast milk taste changes for you, that means you have a very high lipase activity. You need to what is called scalding your breast milk. I wish again I had known this, then I wouldn't have to go through all this trouble of trying to use the freezer stash. So how the scalding of the breast milk works is literally you have to take a clean pan, preferably like stainless steel, heat it up like a fairly like medium heat kind of a thing. Put your breast milk in it. As long as it's sizzle and it has like a slight boil to it, so switch it off. You don't want to boil the milk, like you don't want to get it to a rolling boil. But what you want to do is that you want to heat up the breast milk to a certain level. I can't remember the exact temperature, but I used to measure the temperature later on as well. And then switch it off and let it cool down, and then you refrigerate it. So what that does is that it kills that lipase enzyme in it and kind of lowers the activity so that when you do go ahead and freeze it, it doesn't change the taste.
So you mean first you don't put it directly in the freezer, you have to keep it in the fridge first, or you can also just put it directly in the freezer once this process is done?
Okay, so if you are scalding the breast milk, then it's better to first cool it to room temperature outside, then put it in the fridge, then put it in the freezer. I think when you do this, it kind of like reduces the temperature gradient that the milk has to go through. Actually, anyways, they say that even if you're putting freshly pumped breast milk without scalding, if you're putting it in the freezer, you ideally still should put it in the fridge first. Let it come to a fridge temperature, which is about 4 degrees, and then put it in the freezer instead of putting directly in the freezer. So, like, these are also things that I learned.
So, if, for example, I have breast milk in the fridge and it's been 4 days, right? Because you said for 4 days it can be in the fridge. Now, it's been 4 days, but I have that milk. It's okay to transfer that to the freezer then, right? That's what you were saying.
Can. Yeah, you can extend the life of that milk for like 6 months by putting it in the freezer.